The sting of humiliation was sharper than the chill of the San Francisco fog rolling in over the bay. For Kaylee Jensen, this parent-teacher gala was supposed to be about her son, a brief civil encounter with the man who had shattered her world. But her ex-husband Gregory had other plans. He stood before her, a smug smile plastered on his face, his arm possessively wrapped around a woman half her age. He wanted an audience for his triumph to show everyone what he had upgraded to. Kaylee thought this was the worst night of her life. She had no idea it was the first night of her real one. The ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel was a symphony of clinking champagne flutes and muted, self-important chatter. Kaylee Jensen clutched her small, worn clutch, feeling as out of place as a sparrow in a flock of peacocks. 2 years post-divorce, these events were still a minefield. She was here for Owen, her 10-year-old son, whose artwork, a surprisingly detailed charcoal sketch of the Golden Gate Bridge, was on display. She just wanted to see his proud face tell him how brilliant he was and then melt back into the quiet anonymity of her small Potrero Hill apartment. Then she saw him. Gregory Shaw. Her ex-husband hadn't just entered the room. He'd made an entrance. He was taller in her memory, more charming. Now seeing him through the clear lens of heartbreak, she saw him for what he was, a man meticulously constructed of brand names and ambition. He wore a custom Xenia suit that probably cost more than her car, and his smile was a weapon he wielded with practiced ease. But it wasn't him that made her breath catch. It was the woman attached to his arm. She was impossibly young, with hair the color of spun gold and a white dress so tight it looked painted on. Kaylee recognized her from Gregory's relentless social media post, Brittany, the 24-year-old lifestyle influencer. Kaylee tried to turn to blend into a conversation about property taxes, but Gregory's eyes, like a heat-seeking missile, locked onto her. He steered Brittany through the crowd, a shark parting a school of fish. "Kaylee, I was hoping we'd run into you." He boomed, his voice dripping with false sincerity. The heads of several parents' people she'd known for years swiveled in their direction. The show was about to begin. "Gregory," she said, her voice a tight knot in her throat, "the student art looks wonderful." He waved a dismissive hand. "Oh yes, Owen's little hobby. It's cute." He then pulled the young woman forward. "Kaylee, I want you to properly meet my fiancée, Brittany." Brittany offered a small, disinterested wave, her acrylic nails clicking against her phone. "Hey," she chirped, her eyes scanning the room for someone more important. "We just got back from Santorini," Gregory continued, his voice loud enough for the entire zip code to hear. "Finalizing the wedding plans. We're booking the entire resort, of course, for a full week. You can't put a price on perfection, can you?" He looked directly at Kaylee, a cruel glint in his eye. The subtext was screaming, "This is what you'll never have. This is what you weren't good enough for." Kaylee remembered the years she had worked 2 jobs to support him through his MBA, the dreams she'd put on hold, the inheritance from her parents she had used to fund his first failed startup. All of it erased for this. "That's nice, Gregory," she managed to say. "I'm sure it will be beautiful." "Oh, it will be," Brittany chimed in, suddenly engaged. "My dress is a custom Galia Le Havre. It's being flown in from Tel Aviv. Gregory says I deserve only the best." She squeezed his arm, looking up at him with doe-eyed adoration that Kaylee knew was as transactional as his stock portfolio. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that crawled up her neck. She could feel the pitying stares of the other parents. There was Mrs. Davenport, whose son was in Owen's class, whispering behind her hand to another mother. They saw Kaylee in her 3-year-old department store dress her simple pearl earrings, a gift from her late grandmother, and they saw the woman Gregory had discarded for a newer model. "Well," Kaylee said, forcing a smile that felt like cracking glass, "I need to find Owen. It was an experience meeting you, Brittany." She turned to leave, but Gregory's voice stopped her. "Oh, Kaylee, one more thing." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. He extracted a single $100 bill and held it out to her. "For Owen, for art supplies or whatever. I know things must be tight. The room went silent. The air crackled with the sheer audacity of the gesture. It wasn't kindness. It was a public execution. He was branding her as a charity case. Her hand trembled, but she didn't take the money. "That won't be necessary, Gregory," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Owen has everything he needs." Before he could retort, her phone, an old cracked iPhone, buzzed in her clutch. She fumbled for it, grateful for the interruption. The screen read unknown number. Normally she'd ignore it, but right now it was a lifeline. She stepped away from the suffocating circle of onlookers and answered, turning her back to Gregory. "Hello? Am I speaking with Ms. Kaylee Jensen?" a man's voice asked. It was deep, formal, and carried an unexpected gravity. "Yes, this is she." "Ms. Jensen, my name is Nathaniel Cole. I am an attorney with the firm Cole, Rivington & Finch. I am calling on behalf of the estate of the late Mr. Walter Pendleton. I apologize for the late hour, but I've been trying to reach you with some urgency." The name tickled a distant memory. Walter Pendleton, her grandmother's estranged, eccentric brother. Her great-uncle. She hadn't heard his name in 20 years. He was a recluse, a myth in their family. "My great-uncle, is everything all right?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm very sorry to inform you, Ms. Jensen, but Mr. Pendleton passed away peacefully 2 days ago." "Oh." Kaylee breathed, a strange, detached sadness washing over her for a man she never knew. I'm sorry to hear that." "There is more, Ms. Jensen." The lawyer continued, his tone measured. "Mr. Pendleton has named you in his final will and testament. In fact, he has named you as his sole heir and beneficiary. It is imperative that we meet first thing in the morning. Your life is about to change in ways you cannot possibly imagine." Kaylee's mind reeled. Sole heir to what? A dusty house full of books. A few $1,000s. She turned back towards the crowd. Gregory was now holding court, laughing loudly as Brittany showed off a monstrous diamond ring on her finger. He caught Kaylee's eye and gave her a final dismissive smirk. A strange calm settled over Kaylee. She didn't know what the lawyer was talking about, but a tiny forgotten spark of defiance flickered to life within her. "Mr. Cole," she said into the phone, her voice steady and clear. "Tell me where and when. I'll be there." As she hung up, she met Gregory's gaze one last time. His smug smile was still there, but for the first time in 2 years it didn't hurt. It was just pathetic. He thought he had won. He thought he had just delivered the final crushing blow. He had no idea the world had just tilted on its axis. The next morning, Kaylee drove her sputtering 10-year-old Honda Civic into the heart of San Francisco's financial district. The car felt like a dinghy in a sea of gleaming black town cars and Teslas. The office of Cole, Rivington & Finch occupied the top 3 floors of a skyscraper that pierced the morning fog, a steel and glass testament to old money and power. Her sensible flats clicked nervously on the marble floor of the lobby. The air smelled of lemon polish and wealth. When she gave her name to the receptionist, the woman's professional veneer cracked for a moment, her eyes widening slightly before she regained her composure. "Of course, Ms. Jensen. Mr. Cole is expecting you. 52nd floor." The elevator ride was a silent, stomach-churning ascent. She smoothed down her best black dress, the one she saved for funerals and job interviews, feeling woefully underdressed. Nathaniel Cole was not what she expected. He wasn't a stuffy old man. He was in his late 30s with kind, intelligent eyes, sharp features, and a calm demeanor that immediately put her at ease. He stood as she entered his corner office, which offered a godlike view of the bay. "Ms. Jensen, thank you for coming on such short notice," he said, shaking her hand. His grip was firm and reassuring. "Please have a seat. Can I get you some coffee water?" "Water would be lovely, thank you," she murmured, sinking into a leather chair that was softer than her bed. He poured her a glass from a crystal carafe before taking his seat behind a vast mahogany desk. On it was a single thick, leather-bound document. "Ms. Jensen, Kaylee. I'm going to be direct as I believe that's the best way to handle matters of this magnitude. As I mentioned, your great-uncle Walter Pendleton has passed. His will is unequivocal. He has left his entire estate to you." Kaylee nodded. "I understand. I never really knew him. My grandmother mentioned he was a bit of a hermit. I assume he left behind his house." Nathaniel Cole leaned forward, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. "He did leave you his house, yes. The Pendleton estate in Pacific Heights. But that is, forgive the phrasing, a mere drop in the ocean." He slid the leather-bound document across the desk. Kaylee Walter Pendleton was not just a bit of a hermit. For the past 50 years he was the silent sole owner and chairman of Pendleton Industries. The name meant nothing to her. She must have looked confused because he continued. "Pendleton Industries is a global private holding company. It's not a name you'd see on the news because Walter valued his privacy above all else. But you would know its subsidiaries." He picked up a tablet and started swiping. "It owns a majority stake in Viridian Logistics, one of the largest shipping firms on the West Coast. It wholly owns Argent Hotels, a chain of 5-star luxury resorts across Europe and Asia. It has a controlling interest in a half-dozen major tech startups in Silicon Valley, significant real estate holdings in New York and London, and what is considered one of the most valuable private art collections in the world." Kaylee stared at him, her mind unable to process the words. It felt like he was speaking a foreign language. Viridian Logistics, Argent Hotels. This couldn't be real. I think there's been a mistake," she stammered. "My great-uncle, he was a history professor who retired early. My grandmother said he lived off a modest inheritance." "That was the story he wanted people to believe," Nathaniel explained patiently. "He inherited a small shipping company from his father in the 1960s. But Walter was a genius, a visionary with a Midas touch. He grew that small company into the conglomerate it is today, all while convincing the world and apparently his own family that he was a reclusive academic. He hated the spotlight and the greed it attracted." He paused, letting the information sink in. "We've had the estate provisionally valued for probate. Kaylee, the conservative estimate of your inheritance, the total net worth of Pendleton Industries and all its assets is approximately $18.7 billion. The number hung in the air, vast and incomprehensible. $18.7 billion. Kaylee felt the room tilt. The water glass in her hand trembled, sending ripples across the surface. She thought of the $100 bill Gregory had tried to shove at her. She thought of the overdue credit card bill on her kitchen counter. She thought of the constant grinding anxiety about money that had been her companion for years. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in her throat. She quickly stifled it, pressing her fingers to her lips. Nathaniel watched her, his expression one of profound empathy. "I know this is a shock. It's a seismic, life-altering event." "Why me?" she finally whispered. "I never even met him. We exchanged a few Christmas cards when I was a child, that's all." "He left a letter for you," Nathaniel said, retrieving a thick cream-colored envelope from the folder. "Perhaps it will explain." Kaylee took the envelope. Her name was written on the front in a spidery, elegant script. Her hands shook as she opened it. The letter was dated 1 week before his death. "My dearest Kaylee, if you are reading this, then my time as a ghost in the machine has come to an end. Forgive an old man's secrecy. I have watched you from afar more than you know. Your grandmother, my beloved sister, used to send me your school reports, your art projects, your college essays on Renaissance art. I saw in you her same spark of intelligence, her integrity, and a quiet strength you likely do not recognize in yourself. I saw you marry a man of shallow ambition. I saw you sacrifice your own passions to fuel his. I saw him discard you when he thought you were no longer of use to him. And I saw you carry on with dignity and an unwavering focus on your son. You, Kaylee, are a Pendleton. We are made of stronger stuff. This empire I have built needs a steady hand, a moral compass. It does not need another shark in a suit. It needs a guardian. It needs someone who understands the value of things beyond their price tag. someone who understands beauty, history, and legacy. It needs you. Do not be afraid. You are more capable than you know. Inside the main safe at the house, you will find my personal journals. They will be your guide. Trust Nathaniel Cole. He is a good man, as was his father before him. Your life is your own now. Build a magnificent one. Your great-uncle Walter. Tears streamed down Kaylee's face, blurring the ink. He had seen her. All this time when she had felt most invisible, this mysterious, reclusive billionaire had been watching over her, believing in her. She looked up at Nathaniel, her expression a mixture of grief, shock, and a dawning, terrifying resolve. "What happens now?" "Now," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "we begin. There are, of course, conditions. The will stipulates that you must assume the role of chairwoman of the board of Pendleton Industries within 30 days. The current board, well, they were not expecting you. They are, to put it mildly, a den of vipers. They will test you. They will try to usurp control." He stood up and walked to the window, gazing down at the city. "Walter built an empire, Kaylee. Now you have to learn how to rule it." Kaylee looked down at her great-uncle's letter. Then she thought of Gregory's smirking face, the $100 bill, the public humiliation. That was her old life. A life where she was powerless, pitied, and pushed aside. This new life was terrifying. It was impossible. But as she looked out at the vast expanse of the city and the bay beyond, she felt a strength she hadn't known she possessed rising within her. Walter Pendleton was right. She was made of stronger stuff, and she was about to prove it. Nathaniel Cole drove her personally. They left the cold corporate world of the financial district and wound their way up the impossibly steep hills to Pacific Heights. Here the air was different, rarefied. Mansions stood like silent sentinels, shielded by 100-year-old trees and ornate iron gates, gazing impassively at the panoramic views of the bay. They stopped before a gate that was more of a fortress wall, a 20-foot-high barrier of stone and wrought iron completely obscured by a curtain of ancient ivy. Nathaniel spoke quietly into an intercom, and the massive gate swung inward without a sound. The driveway, paved with smooth gray cobblestones, curved through a manicured English garden that seemed to go on for acres. And then she saw it. The Pendleton estate wasn't a house. It was a monument. A sprawling, Gilded Age mansion of granite and limestone with turrets and balconies and countless windows that stared out like knowing eyes. "My God," Kaylee whispered. It was like something out of a fairy tale or a Gothic novel. An elderly man in a simple black suit, his back ramrod straight, was waiting for them at the massive oak doors. "Ms. Jensen," Nathaniel said, "this is Mr. Davies. He has been the estate manager for over 40 years. He was Mr. Pendleton's most trusted confidant." Mr. Davies inclined his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "Welcome, Ms. Jensen. We have been expecting you." His voice was a crisp British accent, seemingly untouched by his decades in California. He led them inside. The foyer was cavernous, with a 30-foot ceiling from which hung a chandelier that looked like a cascade of frozen diamonds. The floor was a checkerboard of black and white marble, and a grand staircase swept upwards into the shadows of the second floor. But it was the art that made Kaylee gasp. The walls were lined with masterpieces. She was an art history major. She knew what she was looking at. A Monet water lily scene, vibrant and alive, hung opposite a dark, brooding Caravaggio. A Degas sculpture of a dancer was poised on a pedestal near a stark geometric Mondrian. It was a museum, a world-class museum hidden away inside a private home. He lived here. With all this? Kaylee asked, her voice filled with awe. Mr. Pendleton believed that beauty should be a part of one's daily life, not just for visiting on a Sunday. Mr. Davies said, a flicker of warmth in his eyes. He spent most of his time in the library. This way, please. The library was even more stunning. 2 stories high, with floor-to-ceiling shelves of leather-bound books, a rolling ladder, and a fireplace large enough to stand in. In the center of the room was a massive desk, tidy and organized as if its owner had just stepped out for a moment. "The safe is behind the 17th century cartography map," Nathaniel said, pointing to a large framed map of the world. He worked a hidden latch and a section of the bookshelf swung inwards, revealing a heavy steel door. He entered a code and the vault clicked open. Inside were stacks of ledgers and a pile of thick leather-bound journals. "His personal journals," Nathaniel said, handing one to Kaylee, "as per his letter." Kaylee opened the first journal. The same elegant spidery script filled the page. The first entry was dated 50 years ago. "Took possession of father's shipping business today. It's a mess. But I see a path forward. The world is getting smaller, and the one who controls how things move from A to B will have a great deal of power." She spent the next hour in a daze, guided by Mr. Davies through a fraction of the house. There was a ballroom, a formal dining room that could seat 50, a state-of-the-art kitchen, and a glass conservatory filled with exotic orchids. Her own apartment, the one she had struggled to afford after the divorce, could fit inside the master bedroom's walk-in closet. It was too much. The scale of it was suffocating. This wasn't a life. It was an institution. How could she possibly manage all of this? How could she run a multi-billion-dollar corporation? She was just Kaylee Jensen, the woman Gregory Shaw had publicly shamed with a $100 bill just last night. Meanwhile, across town, Gregory was having a celebratory lunch with Brittany at a trendy waterfront restaurant. He was regaling her with the story of his encounter with Kaylee. "And then I pulled out a C note and offered it to her," he bragged, sipping his overpriced Chardonnay. "You should have seen her face, babe. The look of utter defeat. It was perfect." "But," Brittany giggled, more focused on getting the perfect angle for a selfie with her lobster roll. "You're so bad, Greggy." "She needed to be put in her place," Gregory said, puffing out his chest. "Always acting so high and mighty with her art history degree like she was better than me. Well, who's winning now?" He glanced at his Rolex. "I've got that quarterly review call in an hour. We're about to close a big deal. Another fat commission check is coming my way." His phone buzzed. It was a news alert from a financial journal he subscribed to. He glanced at it, ready to swipe it away, but the headline caught his eye. "Walter Pendleton, reclusive architect of Pendleton Industries, dead at 88, successor unnamed for 18 Bonbee Empire." Gregory frowned. Pendleton Industries. He knew the name. They were the silent money behind a company his firm was trying to acquire. They were a ghost, a legend in the financial world. He tapped the article, his curiosity piqued. He scrolled through the details of the conglomerate's vast holdings, Viridian Logistics, Argent Hotels, his eyes widening with each paragraph. This was an unbelievable amount of power now up for grabs. He kept scrolling until he reached the final paragraph. "Sources close to the estate, which is being handled by the prestigious firm of Cole, Rivington and Finch, have indicated that Pendleton's long-lost great-niece has been identified as the sole heir. While her name has not been officially released, our insiders have identified her as Kaylee Jensen of San Francisco." Gregory's wine glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. "Greggy, what's wrong?" Brittany asked, annoyed that he'd ruined her shot. He didn't answer. He was staring at the name on his phone screen. Kaylee Jensen. His Kaylee. The quiet, mousy woman in the cheap dress he had just humiliated. It was impossible. A joke. A typo. It had to be. He reread the sentence. Then again. His face went pale. The blood drained from his head and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. The numbers swam before his eyes. $18 billion. The smug satisfaction he had felt just moments ago curdled into a black, nauseating dread. He hadn't just divorced his wife. He had divorced one of the wealthiest women in the world. He hadn't just publicly shamed her. He had performed his petty act of cruelty just hours before she inherited a kingdom. The $100 bill. The thought of it made him want to vomit. He had made the biggest, most catastrophic mistake of his entire life. The 30 days stipulated in the will passed in a blur of legal briefings, financial tutorials, and sleepless nights for Kaylee. She moved into a guest suite at the Pendleton estate feeling like an imposter in her own home. She spent her days with Nathaniel and a team of analysts he'd hired trying to absorb 50 years of corporate history. She read Walter's journals every night, his voice a guiding hand from the past, filled with shrewd observations, ruthless business tactics, and a surprising, deeply ingrained code of ethics. The day of her first board meeting arrived like a death sentence. She was to be officially installed as chairwoman. Dressed in a custom-tailored navy blue suit, Nathaniel had insisted she purchase an armor, he'd called it. She walked into the boardroom on the top floor of the Pendleton Industries building. The room was intimidating, a long black marble table surrounded by 20 high-backed leather chairs. 18 of them were already occupied by the board members. They were all men, all over 50, all exuding an aura of predatory power. As she entered, the conversation stopped. All eyes turned to her, and the collective judgment in the room was a palpable force. They looked at her simple pearl earrings, her understated makeup, and saw exactly what Gregory had seen: a suburban mother, a dilettante, a weak link. Nathaniel made the introductions. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, allow me to present Ms. Kaylee Jensen, the chosen successor of Mr. Walter Pendleton and the new chairwoman of Pendleton Industries. A man at the opposite end of the table with silver hair and a vulpine smile did not stand. He merely steepled his fingers and watched her with cold, calculating eyes. This was Vincent Dubois, the chief operating officer, the man who had run the day-to-day operations for Walter for the last 15 years. The man Nathaniel had warned her who had fully expected to be given control of the company. Ms. Jensen, Vincent began, his voice a smooth, condescending purr. Welcome. We were all surprised by Walter's decision. While we respect his final wishes, you must understand that this is a complex global operation. It is not a book club. A few of the other men chuckled. Kaylee took her seat at the head of the table, Walter's seat. It felt cold and vast. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, but she remembered a line from Walter's journal: "Never let them see you bleed. The first to show weakness is the first to be eaten." She looked directly at Vincent, her gaze level. Thank you for the welcome, Mr. Dubois. And you are correct. This is not a book club. It is my company, a company my great-uncle entrusted to me, and a legacy I intend to protect. The directness of her response seemed to momentarily surprise them. Vincent's smile tightened. Of course. To that end, we have a number of pressing matters on the agenda. The first being the finalization of the Callaway acquisition. He gestured to an analyst who began to put a presentation up on the large screen. It's a hostile takeover of a rival logistics firm. We're in the final stages. All it requires is your signature as chairwoman to release the final tranche of funds. A simple formality. He slid a thick document and a pen in front of her. It was a test. He wanted her to sign it without reading to prove she was just a rubber stamp, a figurehead he could control. Kaylee didn't touch the pen. Before I sign anything that commits $1.2 billion of my company's capital, she said, her voice clear and steady, I'd like to understand the full asset portfolio of the company we are acquiring. Vincent's eyes flashed with irritation. It's all in the prospectus, Ms. Jensen. It's a standard acquisition. Their shipping lanes are synergistic with our own. I'm not talking about the shipping lanes. Kaylee interrupted. She had been up until 3 a.m. reading Walter's journals, and a specific entry from 5 years ago had snagged her attention. Dubois is pushing for the Callaway acquisition. He sees ships and trucks. He's blind to the real prize. Or worse, he isn't. She continued, Callaway Logistics in the 1980s, in an attempt to diversify, acquired a number of seemingly random assets. One of them was the Belle Epoque collection, a portfolio of early 20th century French artwork purchased as a hedge against inflation. It's listed in the asset ledger as a single line item valued at its purchase price of $5 million. I'd like to know what's in that collection. The room went silent. The board members exchanged confused glances. Vincent Dubois froze, his mask of smug superiority slipping for the first time. "That's a minor asset, Ms. Jensen. A historical footnote in their accounting," he stammered. "Is it?" Kaylee pressed, her confidence growing. "Because my art history degree, which I'm sure you all find so quaint, tells me that any collection from that period might contain some interesting pieces. For example, a little-known sculptor named Antoine Dubois was gaining prominence then. No relation, I presume, Mr. Dubois." Vincent's face went rigid. "That's an absurd insinuation." "Is it?" Kaylee said, leaning forward. "Because Walter's private notes suggest he believed the centerpiece of that collection, a sculpture thought lost after World War II called The Veiled Heart, was created by that same sculptor. A piece that, if it were to be authenticated and brought to auction today, would be worth an estimated $80 to $100 million. Far from a minor asset. It seems strange to me that a man with your surname would overlook a potential 9-figure asset created by an artist with the same rather uncommon name." She let the accusation hang in the air. She had no proof. It was a calculated bluff based on a dead man's journal entry and a hunch. But the look on Vincent's face told her everything. He had known. He was planning to acquire the company, then quietly absorb the art collection himself, likely through a proxy cheating Pendleton Industries out of a fortune. The other board members stared at Vincent, their expressions shifting from dismissal of Kaylee to suspicion of their COO. They were sharks, and they could smell blood in the water. Kaylee stood up, her small frame commanding the attention of the entire room. "The Callaway acquisition is on hold," she declared, her voice ringing with an authority she didn't know she possessed. "I am commissioning a full independent audit of all of Callaway's assets to be conducted by a firm of my choosing, specifically an immediate appraisal of the Belle Epoque collection. We will not proceed until I know exactly what it is we are buying." She looked around the table, meeting the eyes of every man there. "My great-uncle built this company on a foundation of integrity and meticulous attention to detail. It seems some of you have forgotten that. Consider this a reminder." She turned and walked out of the boardroom, her back straight, leaving a stunned silence and a seething Vincent Dubois in her wake. She didn't let them see her hands shaking until she was safely inside the elevator. She had faced the lions, and for today she hadn't been eaten. She had drawn first blood. The news of Kaylee Jensen's dramatic move at the Pendleton Industries board meeting sent shockwaves through San Francisco's elite financial circles. The story, leaked by a board member eager to curry favor with the new power, was intoxicating the unknown heiress the scorned ex-wife had faced down the formidable Vincent Dubois and exposed a potential multi-million-dollar fraud on her very first day. The narrative was irresistible. Kaylee Jensen wasn't a figurehead. She was a queen claiming her throne. For Gregory Shaw, the news was a daily escalating torture. His colleagues whispered about it at the office. His clients mentioned it in meetings. His ex-wife's face was now subtly, tastefully gracing the pages of financial journals he once read with aspirational envy. Every mention was a fresh twist of the knife, reminding him of the cosmic scale of his miscalculation. His life with Brittany was also beginning to fray. The thrill of the new and shiny was wearing off, replaced by the grating reality of her expensive tastes and shallow conversation. Their wedding, which he had flaunted to humiliate Kaylee, now felt like a financial guillotine hanging over his head. The Santorini resort, the designer dress, the endless demands, it was all predicated on a future of fat commission checks, a future that now seemed laughably small compared to the fortune he had thrown away. Desperation began to set in. He had to get back in Kaylee's orbit. He had to undo the damage. He convinced himself that she must still love him, that their years together must count for something. He just needed a way in, and he knew exactly what, or rather who, that was: their son Owen. He started by calling Kaylee's phone. It went straight to a new voicemail, one answered by a polite professional female voice. "You've reached the office of Ms. Kaylee Jensen. Please leave a message." The office of Ms. Kaylee Jensen. The words were a slap in the face. He left a fumbling, awkward message. She never called back. He tried emailing, his tone shifting from casual to pleading. Kaylee, we need to talk about Owen's summer plans. Kaylee, I have some old family photos I thought you might want. Kaylee, I miss you. All went unanswered. He was blocked professionally and personally, shut out of the fortress she now inhabited. His desperation reached a fever pitch. He decided on a direct assault. Knowing Owen had a standing Saturday morning art class, a class Kaylee always dropped him off at personally, he planned his ambush. That Saturday, Kaylee pulled up to the art studio in a new, understated but clearly expensive black Audi sedan, driven by a discreet security professional Mr. Davies had insisted upon. She looked different. The stress and weariness that had clung to her for years were gone, replaced by a focused, calm energy. Her hair was professionally styled, and she wore a simple but elegant cashmere sweater. She was glowing with a newfound confidence. As she was hugging Owen goodbye, Gregory stepped out from behind a parked car. Kaylee, he said, trying to sound casual, but his voice was tight with anxiety. Kaylee's smile vanished. Her posture became rigid. Gregory, this is not the time or the place. Please, he begged, his eyes wide and earnest. Just 5 minutes, for Owen's sake. She hesitated, her gaze falling on her son, who looked nervously between his parents. She didn't want a scene. Fine, she said, her voice cold. 5 minutes. She gave Owen a final squeeze. I'll see you in 2 hours, sweetie. As Owen went inside, Gregory launched into his rehearsed speech. Kaylee, I've been a fool, an absolute blind idiot. Leaving you was the worst mistake of my life. You seem to be doing just fine with Brittany. Kaylee replied, her tone devoid of emotion. Brittany. He scoffed as if the name were an absurdity. That's nothing. A distraction. A ridiculous mistake. I'm ending it, Kaylee. I swear. It was always you. It's always been you. He reached out to touch her arm, but she recoiled as if from a snake. Don't, Gregory. His face crumpled. I saw the news. About everything. I'm so proud of you. I always knew you had it in you. You're brilliant, Kaylee. I was just too stupid to see it. The words that once would have been a healing balm to her wounded soul now sounded hollow and pathetic. She saw his flattery for what it was, a desperate attempt to claw his way into her new life, into her wealth. What do you want, Gregory? She asked, her voice sharp. I want us back. He whispered, his eyes welling with manufactured tears. I want our family back. Think of Owen. He deserves to have his parents together. We can be a family again. A real family. In that big house. We could give him the world. The mention of her house, her money, confirmed everything. It was never about her. It was about what she had. The last vestiges of any lingering sentimentality Kaylee might have harbored for the man she once loved evaporated in that moment. Let me be perfectly clear, Gregory, she said, her voice as hard and sharp as a diamond. You didn't want a family. You wanted an accessory, and when you thought you found a shinier one, you traded me in. The only thing that has changed is my price tag. You are not proud of me. You are impressed by my bank account. You don't miss us. You miss the lifestyle you think I can provide. She took a step closer, her eyes blazing with a fire he had never seen before. You will not use our son as a pawn in your greedy little games. You will stick to the custody agreement. Your lawyers can speak to my lawyers if you have any issues. But you and I, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, are finished. There is no us. There is no going back. Don't you ever ambush me like this again. She turned and walked to her car without a backward glance. The security driver opened the door for her and she slid inside. Gregory stood on the sidewalk, utterly defeated. The woman who had just spoken to him was not the same one he had divorced. The old Kaylee would have cried. The old Kaylee might have even believed him. This new Kaylee saw right through him down to the rotten core of his ambition. As the Audi pulled away, he saw his reflection in the tinted window. A desperate, pathetic man who had traded a diamond for a piece of glass and was only now realizing his mistake. He had lost, completely and irrevocably, and he had no one to blame but himself. In the weeks that followed, Kaylee delved deeper into the labyrinthine world of Pendleton Industries. She worked tirelessly, often late into the night, in Walter's library, with Nathaniel Cole becoming her constant shadow and trusted advisor. The independent audit she had commissioned for the Callaway acquisition had yielded spectacular results. Not only was the Veiled Heart sculpture found crated up in a forgotten warehouse, but it was authenticated and valued at an astonishing $112 million. The revelation sent a shockwave through the company. Vincent Dubois was suspended by the board pending a full investigation. He had been caught, and Kaylee's reputation as a shrewd, decisive leader was cemented. But her instincts, honed by Walter's journals, told her this was just the tip of the iceberg. Dubois wouldn't have acted alone. Walter wrote about a shadow counsel, she told Nathaniel one evening, pointing to a passage in a journal. He suspected some board members were working with outside interests, slowly siphoning funds into shell corporations, preparing for a takeover the moment he was gone. He just couldn't prove it. Together, they began a discreet, deep-dive investigation. They hired forensic accountants, cybersecurity experts, and private investigators. They started tracing the complex web of offshore accounts and anonymous holding companies that Dubois and his allies had created. It was a conspiracy far more sophisticated and dangerous than Kaylee had imagined. They weren't just embezzling, they were trying to systematically devalue Pendleton Industries from within, making it vulnerable to a hostile buyout from a shadowy competitor in Dubai. Vincent Dubois wasn't the mastermind. He was just a high-level pawn. While Kaylee was uncovering corporate treason, Gregory Shaw's world was imploding. His pathetic attempt to win Kaylee back had failed, leaving him with nothing but shame and the ticking time bomb of his relationship with Brittany. The cancellation of their lavish Santorini wedding, a necessity after his biggest deal at work fell through and his commission evaporated, was the first major crack. "What do you mean we're postponing?" Brittany had shrieked, waving her phone at him. "I've already posted the save the date to my 300,000 followers. Do you know how embarrassing this is? It's just temporary, babe." Gregory lied, sweating. "A cash flow issue. We'll do it next year even bigger." But next year wasn't good enough. Brittany's affection was directly proportional to his spending. As Gregory's finances dwindled, so did her patience. She complained about the restaurant choices. "This place doesn't even have valet." The quality of the champagne, his preoccupation with the news about Kaylee. The final straw came during a tense dinner. Gregory, morose and drinking too much, was scrolling through a business news site on his phone. A new article had just been published. "The Pendleton Revolution: How Kaylee Jensen Uncovered a Decade-Long Conspiracy and Saved Her $18 Empire." The article detailed in flattering terms how Kaylee's quick thinking had not only saved the company from a disastrous acquisition, but had also exposed a plot that could have destroyed it. It painted her as a brilliant, intuitive leader. There was a photo of her leaving the Pendleton building looking poised, powerful, and serene. "Are you even listening to me?" Brittany snapped, pulling him from his jealous stupor. "I was talking about the new Birkin bag I saw." "We can't afford a Birkin bag, Brittany." He finally exploded, the frustration and failure of the past month boiling over. "We can't afford Santorini. We can't afford any of it. The money's gone." Brittany stared at him, her perfectly made-up face a mask of disbelief. "What do you mean, gone?" "I mean my deal fell through. My bonus is gone and everything is a mess," he yelled. "All you do is spend, spend, spend." "I spend what you told me you could afford," she retorted, her voice rising to a screech. "You're the one who lied to me. You pretended to be this big shot, this master of the universe. You're nothing. You're just some pathetic middle manager who's obsessed with his billionaire ex-wife." The accusation hit him like a physical blow because it was true. "You know what?" she said, grabbing her purse and standing up. The diamond ring he had been so proud of seemed to mock him from her finger. I think you and I are done. I'm an influencer. My brand is about luxury and success. Being with a broke, washed-up loser is not part of that brand." She stormed out of the restaurant, leaving Gregory alone at the table, surrounded by the ruins of his life. He had lost Kaylee. He had lost the respect of his peers. Now he had lost the vapid trophy wife for whom he had sacrificed everything. He had nothing left but his own staggering world-class foolishness. He had chased an illusion of success, and in doing so had become the author of his own complete and utter ruin. The investigation culminated in a dossier thick with irrefutable evidence, wire transfers, encrypted emails, and secretly recorded conversations. Kaylee, with Nathaniel by her side, now held the fate of 4 board members and a powerful Dubai-based consortium in her hands. She could have leaked it to the press, initiated a flurry of lawsuits, and let the authorities handle it. That would have been the conventional route. But Walter's journal spoke of a different strategy. In business, as in chess, sometimes the most powerful move is not to take the king, but to force his surrender and take control of his entire army. Kaylee called an emergency unscheduled board meeting. She didn't summon them to the corporate office. Instead, the invitations were for the library at the Pendleton estate. When the remaining board members arrived, they found not only Kaylee at the head of the great desk, but also the 4 conspirators, including Vincent Dubois, who had been summoned an hour earlier, and were now sitting pale and silent, their careers and freedom hanging by a thread. In front of each seat was a slim folder. "Good morning, gentlemen." Kaylee began, her voice calm and cool, echoing slightly in the vast, book-lined room. "Please open the folders in front of you." They opened them to find a 1-page summary of the conspiracy, a list of names, and the staggering amount of money, nearly $1 billion over 10 years, that had been siphoned from the company. Gasps and curses filled the room. "For the past several weeks," Kaylee continued, "we have uncovered a deep-seated plot to systematically cripple this company from within, orchestrated by individuals in this room and their partners in Dubai." She looked directly at the 4 guilty men. "I have enough evidence to ensure you will all spend the rest of your lives in federal prison. Your assets will be seized, your reputations destroyed. Your families will be disgraced." The terror in their eyes was absolute. "However," she said, pausing for effect, "a public scandal of that magnitude would harm the company, spook the markets, and hurt our employees, the thousands of people who actually work for a living. I am offering you all a different path." She laid out her terms, a masterstroke of strategy that Walter would have admired. They would publicly resign from the board for personal reasons, effective immediately. They would sign over their shares and severance packages back to the company. They would cooperate fully in helping Pendleton Industries legally and systematically recover every single dollar from the Dubai consortium, using their inside knowledge to exploit the weaknesses in the shell corporations they had built. In exchange for their silent total cooperation, she would not press criminal charges. It was checkmate. She wasn't just ousting them. She was using their own criminality as a weapon to make her company whole again. They had no choice. One by one, defeated and broken, they agreed. Later that afternoon, after the last of the disgraced board members had departed, Kaylee stood with Nathaniel by the massive library window, watching the fog roll in over the bay. "That was," Nathaniel said, a slow smile spreading across his face, "the most brilliantly ruthless thing I have ever witnessed in my legal career. You didn't just beat them, Kaylee, you dismantled them." "I had a good teacher," she said, tapping the journal on the desk. She felt a profound sense of peace. The battle for Pendleton Industries was over. She had not only protected her inheritance, she had earned it. Her personal phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something told her to answer it. "Hello." "Kaylee." The voice was broken, barely a whisper. It was Gregory. I saw the news. About Brittany. She left me. I lost my job today, Kaylee. They said my reputational risk was too high after the divorce and everything. I'm losing the condo. I have nothing. There was a time when this call would have brought her a sense of bitter satisfaction of righteous revenge. But listening to the hollowed-out man on the other end of the line, she felt only a distant pity. He wasn't a monster. He was just a weak, small man who had made a series of terrible choices. He was a ghost from a life that no longer belonged to her. "I'm sorry to hear that, Gregory," she said, and she meant it. She was sorry for the man he could have been, and for the father he was failing to be for their son. "My lawyers will be in touch to renegotiate child support given your change in circumstances. I will ensure Owen is always taken care of. Goodbye, Gregory." She ended the call before he could reply, severing the final tie to her past. She looked out the window, not at the fog, but through it to the sparkling lights of the city beyond. 2 months ago, she had stood in a hotel ballroom, a humiliated ex-wife in a department store dress. Now she was the chairwoman of a multi-billion-dollar empire, a protector of a legacy, a mother securing her son's future beyond her wildest dreams. She had faced down corporate predators, confronted her own painful past, and had emerged not just intact, but stronger, smarter, and more herself than ever before. The house, the money, the power, they were just tools. The real inheritance Walter had left her was the discovery of her own strength. Her new life was just beginning, and for the first time she was the one holding the pen, ready to write the next chapter herself. And so Kaylee Jensen's incredible journey took her from the depths of public humiliation to the pinnacle of corporate power. She proved that the end of one story is often the explosive beginning of a much better one. Her triumph wasn't just in gaining an empire, it was in rediscovering the formidable woman who had been there all along, buried under years of self-doubt and sacrifice. Kaylee's story is a powerful reminder that our greatest strength is often forged in the fires of our deepest heartbreaks, and that sometimes the most unexpected key can unlock a destiny we never dared to dream of. If you were moved by Kaylee's incredible transformation from a heartbroken ex-wife to a billionaire powerhouse, show your support by hitting that like button. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder of their own hidden strength. And for more unforgettable tales of dramatic twists and ultimate triumph, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. You won't want to miss the stories we have coming next.
The flash of 1,000 cameras can build a king or expose a fraud. For tech mogul Jasper Vaughan, tonight was supposed to be his coronation. On the glittering red carpet of the Met Gala, he stood with his new younger lover on his arm, the world at his feet. He had everything, the money, the fame, the woman. But what he didn't know was that across the city, the past he so carelessly buried was about to make a spectacular landing. The woman he'd left with nothing was about to arrive with everything, stepping off a billionaire's private jet and into the spotlight, ready to change the narrative forever. The air on the steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art was electric, a heady cocktail of expensive perfume champagne and raw ambition. It was the first Monday in May, and the universe of the elite had converged. Jasper Vaughan, CEO of the tech behemoth Nexus Dynamics, felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. This was his Colosseum. Every camera flash was a validation, every fawning reporter a subject in his kingdom. On his arm, Sienna Monroe clung to him like Kucha ivy. She was 23, a supernova of Instagram fame, whose face was a perfect symmetrical mask of modern beauty. She wore a barely there diamond-encrusted gown by Mugler that was designed less for modesty and more for trending on Twitter. Her smile was blinding, but her eyes, whenever they weren't locked on a camera lens, held a flicker of deep-seated insecurity. She was his living trophy, a testament to his power to acquire the most beautiful things. "Jasper, over here. A question for Vogue." Jasper turned his own smile, practiced and predator-sharp. He wore a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, the fabric so dark it seemed to absorb the light around him. "Anything for you, Anna," he quipped, though the famous editor was nowhere near this particular scrum. It was a power play, a name drop to remind everyone of the circles He now moved in. "Sienna, you look breathtaking." "Who are you wearing?" a reporter from E! News shouted. "Mugler," she purred into the microphone, her voice a practiced, breathy whisper. "And my heart, of course, belongs to Jasper." Jasper squeezed her hand, a proprietary gesture. He loved this, the performance of it all. The world saw him as a visionary, a self-made shaman who had clawed his way from a garage in Palo Alto to the pinnacle of global finance. They didn't see the wreckage he'd left behind. They didn't see the woman who had co-founded his dream in a cramped apartment, fueled by cheap coffee and a shared belief in the future. They didn't see Ariela. Just the thought of her name was like a ghost at the feast. Ariela Vaughn, his wife of 12 years, the woman who knew the original code of his first successful app because she'd helped write it. The woman who'd mortgaged her inheritance, a modest but meaningful sum from her late parents, to fund his first server rack. The woman who had named Nexus Dynamics at their kitchen table, sketching the logo on a napkin while he'd been panicking about payroll. He had cut her out as surgically as a surgeon removes a benign tumor that he simply no longer finds attractive. The divorce had been brutal, swift, and silent. He'd used the best lawyers money could buy, a team from Skadden Arps who had buried her in paperwork and non-disclosure agreements that gagged her for life. She had walked away with a settlement that was, for a man of his stature, insulting. A one-time payment that would allow her to live comfortably, but never to challenge him. The NDAs ensured she could never claim her intellectual property, never speak of her contributions, never tarnish the carefully constructed myth of Jasper Vaughn, the lone genius. He'd told her it was for her own good. "You wouldn't be happy in this world, Elle," he'd said, his voice laced with a cruel pity. "It's all so shallow. You're too real for it." And it was the ultimate gaslighting, framing his betrayal as an act of kindness. Jasper, there are rumors of a new acquisition. A journalist from the Wall Street Journal pressed, pulling him back to the present. "Are you looking to absorb the European tech firm, Ethelred?" Jasper's smile tightened. This was a sensitive topic. The Ethelred deal was his magnum opus, the final jewel in his corporate crown. "We're always exploring opportunities for growth. Nexus is about the future," he said, the perfect corporate non-answer. Sienna, bored with the business talk, tugged at his arm. "Darling, let's go inside. I'm dying for a glass of champagne." As he turned to lead her up the grand staircase, a strange shift occurred in the atmosphere. It was subtle at first, a murmur that rippled through the press line. A few photographers lowered their cameras, earpieces crackled, heads began to turn away from the museum steps and towards the street. "What's going on?" Sienna asked, her voice tinged with annoyance. Their spotlight was being stolen. Jasper followed their gaze. A motorcade of black Cadillac Escalades, the kind reserved for heads of state or the truly powerful, was pulling up, bypassing the designated drop-off zone and gliding to a halt directly in front of the red carpet's entrance. This was a breach of protocol, an audacious power move that even he wouldn't dare attempt. The lead security guard on the carpet, a man named Frank, who had seen it all, spoke into his wrist. "Whose convoy is this? They're not on the list." A collective hush fell over the crowd. The doors of the lead Escalade opened, but it wasn't a celebrity who stepped out. It was a team of security, clad in sharp, understated suits, who moved with an eerie, coordinated efficiency. They fanned out, creating a secure perimeter. Then the rear door of the third vehicle opened. A different kind of silence descended. It was a silence of shock and awe. The photographers, who had momentarily paused, suddenly went into a frenzy. The flashes became a single blinding strobe, a violent, percussive roar of light. The focus of the entire Met Gala, the epicenter of global media, had shifted in an instant. From the opulent darkness of the car, a single, elegant heel emerged. It was a Christian Louboutin, its red sole like a drop of blood against the asphalt. Then a leg, then the silhouette of a woman in a gown of deep emerald silk. A custom creation by Schiaparelli that was both a work of art and a suit of armor. Jasper's blood ran cold. He knew that posture. He knew that quiet, unshakable grace. It couldn't be. As she straightened to her full height, the light caught her face. Her mousy brown hair, which he'd always criticized, was now a rich, warm auburn styled in elegant, cascading waves. Her face, once etched with the stress of supporting his dreams, was now serene and confident. She wore a necklace of Colombian emeralds and diamonds that probably cost more than the settlement he'd given her. It was Ariela, his Ariela. But she wasn't his anymore. She looked like a queen. He stood frozen halfway up the stairs, Sienna's grip on his arm suddenly feeling like a lead weight. The reporters were screaming her name now, their voices a chaotic mix of confusion and excitement. Ariela. Ariela Vaughn. Who are you with? Who are you wearing? Ariela didn't look at them. Her gaze was fixed forward, calm and deliberate. She turned back to the car and extended a hand, and the man who took it, stepping out to join her, was the reason the protocol had been broken. It was Alistair Finch, the reclusive, enigmatic billionaire, the man whose net worth made Jasper's look like pocket change. Alistair Finch, the founder of the Finch Foundation, a titan of industry in renewable energy and aerospace, a man who hadn't walked a red carpet in over a decade. He was the media's white whale, intensely private and impossibly powerful. He stood beside Ariela, his hand protectively on the small of her back. He wasn't smiling for the cameras. He was smiling at her. The Wall Street Journal reporter, who had been grilling Jasper just moments before, now sprinted down the stairs, microphone in hand, his face alight with the biggest scoop of his career. Mr. Finch, what an unexpected surprise. What brings you to the gala tonight? Alistair's voice when he spoke was calm and clear, cutting through the din. My partner, he said, his eyes still on Ariela, expressed an interest in the exhibit, and what Ariela wants, she gets. Partner. The word echoed across the plaza, amplified by 100 hot mics. It was a declaration. Jasper felt the blood drain from his face. His carefully constructed world was tilting on its axis. On the grandest stage imaginable, his discarded past had just upstaged his triumphant present. And she hadn't arrived in a taxi. She'd arrived with the one man in the world he could never compete with. Sienna finally processed what was happening. Is that your ex-wife? She whispered, her voice a mix of disbelief and horror. Jasper couldn't answer. He could only watch as Ariela and Alistair began to walk towards the steps, parting the sea of reporters, like Moses parting the Red Sea. The cameras that had adored him seconds ago were now turned away completely, ignoring him and Sienna. They were old news. The real story was walking towards them. And as Ariela reached the bottom of the staircase, her eyes cool and composed, finally met his. There was no anger in them, no sadness. There was something far worse, indifference. It was the look of a woman who had not only moved on, but had ascended to a stratosphere he couldn't even fathom. The flashbulbs continued to pop, capturing the tableau for eternity. Jasper Vaughn, the new king, standing halfway to the top, forgotten, and Ariela, the woman he had erased, standing at the bottom, poised to begin her ascent, with a true emperor by her side. The world seemed to slow down, contracting to the space between the bottom and top of the grand staircase. For Jasper, it was a dizzying, nauseating vertigo. He and Sienna were frozen in place, suddenly transformed from the night's main event into awkward, overdressed statues. The roar of the press was a physical force, every shouted question for Ariela, a hammer blow to his ego. Ariela, your necklace, is that from the Finch private collection? Mr. Finch, does this mean you're officially back in the public eye? Ariela, a comment for the Times. How does it feel to be back? Back! Jasper thought, a bitter laugh almost escaping his lips. She was never here in the first place. This wasn't her world. He had made sure of that. He had built the walls of this gilded cage himself, and he had been the one to lock her out. Ariela moved with a liquid grace he barely recognized. The woman he remembered would have been flustered by this level of attention, her shoulders slightly hunched, her gaze averted. This woman held her head high, her posture radiating a quiet power that was more commanding than any shout. The Schiaparelli gown, in a shade of emerald so deep it was almost black in the shadows, was a statement. It wasn't just a dress, it was armor, and its severe, elegant lines made Sienna's glittering see-through number look cheap and desperate by comparison. Alistair Finch was the perfect counterpoint to her newfound radiance. Dressed in a simple, impeccably tailored Brioni suit, he wore his power with an ease Jasper could only feign. He didn't crave the cameras, he tolerated them. His focus was entirely on Ariela. He would lean in to whisper something in her ear, and a small, genuine smile would touch her lips. The intimacy of the gesture performed on the world's most public stage was more potent than any passionate kiss. It spoke of a deep, unshakable connection. As they reached the base of the stairs, a path cleared for them. The security team moved with quiet precision. Jasper watched his jaw clenched as Anna Wintour herself, who had not deigned to greet him, descended the first few steps to personally welcome them. She embraced Ariela with a warmth that was famously reserved for only a chosen few. "Ariela, my dear," Anna's voice was crisp and clear. "You look magnificent. Alistair, you old rogue, I knew I could count on you to shake things up." "Only for the right reasons, Anna," Alistair replied smoothly, his hand never leaving Ariela's back. It was then that Ariela's gaze lifted and swept past the fawning fashion icon, past the throng of reporters, and settled directly on Jasper. For a fraction of a second, the universe held its breath. The cool indifference he had seen from a distance was now up close, and it was infinitely more chilling. Her eyes, which had once looked at him with adoration, with hope, with heartbreak, now held nothing but a calm, placid emptiness. It was as if she were looking at a stranger, a piece of furniture that was inconveniently blocking her path. Sienna, recovering her wits, tried to reclaim the narrative. She tightened her grip on Jasper's arm and hissed, "Smile, Jasper. They're watching. Don't let her see she's getting to you." He forced the corners of his mouth to lift, but the expression felt like a death mask. Ariela and Alistair began their ascent. They had to walk past them. The four of them were on a collision course on the crimson-carpeted steps. The photographers held their breath, their fingers poised on the shutters, sensing the impending drama. Ariela's eyes flickered from Jasper to Sienna. She took in the younger woman's desperate beauty, the garish dress, the possessive hand on her ex-husband's arm. There was no judgment in her look, only a fleeting, almost clinical assessment. As they drew level, Jasper couldn't stop himself. The words tore out of him, a low, venomous whisper, meant only for her. "What is this, Elle? What kind of game are you playing?" Ariela paused. Her movement so slight it was almost imperceptible. She turned her head, her emerald earrings catching the light. Alistair stopped with her, his expression unreadable, but his presence a silent, immovable wall. She looked at Jasper, and for the first time that night, she spoke to him. Her voice was not the one he remembered, the one that would tremble during arguments or soften with affection. This voice was level cool and carried a resonance of newfound authority. "Game," she repeated the word, tasting foreign on her tongue. "There's no game, Jasper." She then looked him up and down, a slow, deliberate appraisal that mirrored his own countless dismissive glances from the past. "This is just my life." It was a devastatingly simple sentence, yet it landed with the force of a physical blow. It reframed everything. His grand life, the one he had flaunted, was her game. Her new reality, calm and powerful, was simply her life. She didn't wait for a response. She gave a minute, almost imperceptible nod, a dismissal, and then turned to continue up the stairs. But Sienna, fueled by jealousy and the humiliation of being ignored, couldn't let it go. "He made you, you know." She spat, her voice a shrill whisper that was just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "You were nothing before him." Alistair Finch, who had remained silent, finally moved. He didn't look at Sienna. He didn't raise his voice. He simply shifted his body slightly, a subtle but unmistakable blocking maneuver, and looked down at Jasper. His eyes were like chips of ice. "I believe," Alistair said, his voice a low baritone that cut through the noise. "You and your guest are creating a scene. It would be wise to remember where you are, and more importantly, who you're speaking to." The implicit threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It wasn't about physical violence. It was about something far more terrifying to a man like Jasper, the complete and utter annihilation of his social and financial standing. Alistair Finch could crush Nexus Dynamics with a single phone call, blacklist him from every circle of power, and reduce his empire to dust. Jasper felt a tremor of genuine fear. He gave Sienna's arm a sharp tug, a silent command to shut up. Ariela was already several steps ahead, seemingly unfazed. She paused at the top of the landing framed by the grand entrance to the museum. She looked back, not at Jasper, but out over the sea of flashing lights, the city glittering behind her. She took a deep breath, as if savoring the air of a world that was finally her own. Then she and Alistair disappeared inside, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. The spell was broken. The press, having captured their money shots, began to disperse or follow the real story inside. Jasper and Sienna were left alone on the stairs, the focus of the world having moved on as quickly as it had arrived. The energy, the adoration, the power, it had all evaporated. What was that?" Sienna stammered, her fake confidence shattered. "Who does she think she is?" Jasper finally looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time he didn't see a trophy. He saw a liability. He saw a shallow, foolish girl who had just provoked one of the most powerful men on the planet. He saw a pale imitation of the substance he had thrown away. "Get inside," he ordered, his voice flat and dead, "and don't speak to anyone." He left her there and stalked towards the entrance, his mind racing. This wasn't a random encounter. This was a calculated move. The location, the timing, the choice of escort, it was all designed for maximum impact. Ariela, the quiet, compliant, real woman he had patronized, had just executed a public relations coup that would make the most seasoned Hollywood publicist weep with envy. But how? How did she get to Alistair Finch? The man was a ghost. He didn't do partners. He'd do partners. And why now? As he stepped into the museum's great hall, the enormity of what had just happened began to sink in. He had come here tonight to celebrate his victory, to put the final stamp on his new life. Instead, the prologue to a whole new war had just been written. And this time, he had a terrifying feeling he was no longer the main character. He was the villain. And every villain, sooner or later, faces a reckoning. The inside of the Met was a swirling vortex of high society. The din of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the soft strains of a string quartet filled the air. But for Jasper, it was all background noise. He moved through the throngs of celebrities and power brokers, like a phantom, his mind replaying the scene on the steps in a torturous loop. Everywhere he looked, he saw people huddled together, whispering. He caught snippets of conversation. "Did you see Ariela Vaughn?" "With Alistair Finch, can you believe it?" The look on Jasper's face. That Schiaparelli gown was a declaration of war. He was the subject of gossip, of pity. It was intolerable. He found Sienna near the champagne fountain, already on her second glass, looking sullen and out of her depth. "I can't believe her," Sienna muttered, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of Ariela. "She planned that. She did it just to humiliate you, to humiliate us." "Stop talking," Jasper commanded, grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and downing it in 2 gulps. His mind was a maelstrom of rage and confusion. Sienna's simplistic analysis was both right and wrong. Of course, it was planned, but the Ariela he knew wouldn't have concocted such a scheme for petty revenge. There had to be something more, a deeper strategy at play that he couldn't yet see. His phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket. He pulled it out. The screen was a cascade of notifications. News alerts from Bloomberg, the New York Times, Forbes. His own PR head, a bulldog of a man named Marcus, was calling him repeatedly. He ignored it. He knew what they would say. He swiped to a browser and typed in Ariela's name. The results, which hours ago would have shown a few old forgotten photos of them together and a link to a defunct pottery blog she once kept, were now exploding. Ariela Vaughn was trending worldwide. Articles were already being written. Speculative pieces titled "The Phoenix Who is Ariela Vaughn," Alistair Finch's mystery woman revealed, and most damningly, the ultimate power move as tech CO debuts new love his ex-wife arrives with a titan. He felt a wave of impotent fury. He had spent millions curating his public image, crafting a narrative of solitary genius. In the space of 10 minutes, Ariela had hijacked it, rewritten it, and made him a secondary character in his own life story. He needed to understand. How did she, with her limited resources and non-existent connections, get into the orbit of Alistair Finch? The man was more myth than reality, living on a private island in the Caribbean and communicating with the world through his foundation. He didn't attend parties. He didn't date. He certainly didn't escort jilted ex-wives to the Met Gala. A memory surfaced unbidden. It was from about 6 months ago, during the final ugly stages of their divorce proceedings. His legal team was presenting him with the NDA they had drafted for Ariela. "It's ironclad Mr. Vaughn," the lead attorney, a slick corporate shark named Peterson, had assured him. "She can't discuss the company's formation, her involvement. The initial seed money, nothing. Her name is effectively erased from the corporate history of Nexus Dynamics." "Good," Jasper had said. "She'll sign it." "She's fighting it on one small point," Peterson had replied, looking down at his notes. "It's odd. She's not asking for more money. She's insisting on a clause that releases her from any non-compete obligations specifically related to European tech firms, particularly those specializing in sustainable data solutions." Jasper had scoffed. "Let her have it. What's she going to do? Start a rival company from her one-bedroom apartment. Give her the crumb. It will make her feel like she won something." And he saw it now. It wasn't a crumb. It was a key. Ethelred, the European firm he was trying to acquire, their specialty, sustainable data solutions, the very company the WSJ reporter had asked him about. The connection clicked into place with the force of a thunderclap. This wasn't about the Met Gala. This wasn't about Sienna. This was about Ethelred. He grabbed Sienna's arm, his fingers digging into her skin. "We're leaving." "But we just got here," she protested, whining. "I wanted to get a photo with Zendaya." "Now!" he snarled, dragging her towards a side exit, ignoring the curious stares. The moment they were in the back of his Maybach, he was on the phone with Marcus. "What the hell is going on, Jasper?" Marcus's voice was frantic. "My phone has melted. The board is calling. The narrative is out of control. They're painting you as the villain who threw away a diamond and picked up a piece of glass." "Forget the narrative," Jasper barked, his voice raw. "I need you to dig. I need to know everything about Ariela Vaughn and Alistair Finch. Not the public crap. I need to know when they met, how they met, what their connection is. And I need to know Finch's position on my Ethelred acquisition. Now." He hung up, his heart pounding against his ribs. The dots were connecting into a terrifying picture. Meanwhile, in a quiet private suite overlooking the museum's sculpture garden, Ariela Vaughn took a sip of water, her hand perfectly steady. Alistair sat opposite her in a plush armchair, observing her with a warm, approving gaze. The chaos of the red carpet felt a world away. "You were magnificent," Alistair said, his voice a low, calming rumble. Poised, powerful. You didn't flinch. A small, wry smile touched Ariela's lips. "I was terrified, Alistair. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest." "I would never have known," he said. "Fear is a reaction. Courage is a decision. You were very courageous tonight." Her journey to this moment had not been one of revenge, but of survival. After the divorce, she had been adrift in a sea of grief and betrayal. The man she had loved and built a life with had discarded her as if she were a piece of obsolete hardware. The settlement, while enough to live on, was a constant, insulting reminder of how little he valued her contributions. For months, she had done nothing, paralyzed by the sheer injustice of it all. The NDA she had been forced to sign was a gag, silencing her history, erasing her truth. The turning point had come late one night. She was staring at the business section of a newspaper at a glowing profile of Jasper that described him as a lone visionary. The rage that had been simmering for months finally boiled over. But it wasn't a destructive rage. It was clarifying. It burned away the grief and left behind a cold, hard resolve. He had taken her past, so she would have to build a new future. She remembered the clause she had fought for in the divorce, the one Jasper had dismissed so arrogantly. She had insisted on it because she had been the one to first identify Ethelred as a potential acquisition target for Nexus years ago. She was the one who saw the genius in their sustainable data cooling technology, a field Jasper had deemed a niche, non-profitable distraction. She knew their value better than anyone. She couldn't compete with Nexus, but perhaps she could consult for its competition. Using the last of her savings, she flew to Berlin, the headquarters of Ethelred. She didn't ask for a job. She asked for one meeting offering a free 1-hour consultation on how to counter a hostile takeover from an American tech giant like Nexus Dynamics. She knew Jasper's playbook because she had helped him write it. The German executives, initially skeptical of this unknown American woman, were stunned by her incisive analysis, her intimate knowledge of Nexus's operational weaknesses, and Jasper's psychological blind spots. They offered her a consulting contract on the spot. It was during her work with Ethelred that she came onto Alistair Finch's radar. Finch's foundation was a major silent investor in Ethelred, drawn to its green technology. When he heard that a mysterious consultant named Ariela Vaughn was the mastermind behind Ethelred's brilliant defense strategy against the Nexus takeover bid, he had been intrigued. He summoned her to a meeting. He had expected a hardened corporate mercenary. Instead, he found a brilliant, dignified woman with a quiet fire in her eyes. He wasn't interested in the gossip of her past, but in the clarity of her vision for the future. They met to talk about business, but they ended up talking about everything. Art philosophy, the ethics of technology, the burden of immense success. He saw in her a partner, not in a romantic sense, at least not at first, but an intellectual and spiritual equal. He saw the architect that Jasper had tried to erase. When he learned the full story of her involvement with Nexus and the gag order she was under, his intrigue turned to a cold fury. Alistair Finch was a man who detested bullies and credit thieves. "He didn't just divorce you, Ariela," he had said to her one evening at his estate. "He committed an act of historical erasure. He stole your legacy." "The NDA is unbreakable," she had replied, a familiar wave of hopelessness washing over her. "I can never tell my story." Alistair had leaned forward, his eyes intense. "An NDA prevents you from speaking. It does not prevent you from being. You don't have to tell the world you're brilliant, Ariela. You just have to show them. You don't have to talk about your power. You just have to demonstrate it. We will not break the NDA. We will make it irrelevant." And so the plan was born. It was not about revenge. It was about reclamation. The Met Gala was not the endgame. It was the opening move. It was a signal to the world. and specifically to Jasper that Ariela was no longer a ghost. She was a player, and she was now backed by a king. Jasper knows now, Ariela said, her gaze distant. He's not stupid. He'll have connected me to Ethelred. He'll be digging. Let him dig, Alistair said, with a calm smile. He'll only find what I want him to find, that you are the lead strategic consultant for Ethelred's defense, and that my foundation is increasing its stake in the company with you being appointed to the board of directors next month. Ariela took a deep breath. Board of Directors. The title felt immense, terrifying, and exhilarating. He will fight dirty, she warned. He will come after me. He'll use the press. He'll try to smear my name. I know, Alistair said. His expression grew serious. And that is the next phase of our strategy. We've shown them your power. Now we will show them your character. Let him sling his mud. We will be ready. He stood up and offered her his hand. But for tonight, let's not talk about Jasper. Let's go and look at some art. Let's allow the world to see you simply enjoying your life. There is no greater victory than that. She took his hand, and for the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace. The war was far from over, but for the first time she was on solid ground with an ally who didn't just see her as a support system, but as the architect herself. And together, they were about to draw up the blueprints for Jasper Vaughan's downfall. The fallout from the Met Gala was swift and brutal. Jasper Vaughan, a man accustomed to controlling the narrative, found himself caught in a tsunami of public opinion he could not command. His PR team worked around the clock, but it was like trying to patch a dam with chewing gum. The image of Ariela poised and powerful next to the enigmatic Alistair Finch was seared into the public consciousness. It was a story of rebirth and empowerment, and in that story, Jasper was cast as the villain. His first move was a calculated leak to a friendly gossip columnist at page 6. The story planted by Marcus painted Ariela as a bitter ex-wife who had seduced an aging, reclusive billionaire in a desperate act of revenge. It hinted at mental instability, at an obsession with her ex-husband's success. It was a classic, misogynistic smear designed to discredit her and reframe her appearance as pathetic rather than powerful. The article ran, but it didn't have the intended effect. Instead of swaying public opinion, it backfired. Feminist commentators and online forums immediately decried it as a transparent attempt to silence a woman who had clearly leveled up. Social media exploded with hashtags like #TeamAriela and #VindicateDVaughan. People saw the story for what it was, the desperate flailing of a man whose ego had been wounded. Sienna, meanwhile, was becoming a significant problem. The public humiliation had cracked her carefully constructed facade. She vacillated between fits of rage, accusing Jasper of not protecting her, and bouts of weeping insecurity. Her social media, once a stream of glamorous selfies and sponsored posts, became erratic. She posted and deleted cryptic quotes about loyalty and betrayal. She was a loose cannon, and Jasper, whose life was built on meticulous control, found her emotional chaos unbearable. "You need to get a grip," he snapped at her one morning in his sterile glass-walled penthouse overlooking Central Park. She was crying because a designer had indefinitely postponed a collaboration with her, a clear sign that her brand was now tainted by his bad press. "A grip," she shrieked, her mascara running. "My career is being ruined because your ex-wife decided to play Cinderfucking-Rella. And what are you doing about it? Nothing. That stupid article made things worse." The article was a strategic misstep, he conceded through gritted teeth. "We're moving on to phase 2. Phase 2 was far more ruthless. Unable to win in the court of public opinion, Jasper decided to attack where he felt Ariela was truly vulnerable, her professional credibility and the Ethelred deal. He called an emergency meeting with his M&A team. "Forget the charm offensive," he ordered, pacing his boardroom. The skyline of New York was his backdrop, but it offered no comfort. "We're going hostile. I want to initiate a proxy battle for Ethelred. We'll go directly to their shareholders, and I want our opposition research team to dig into every single aspect of their board and key consultants, specifically Ariela Vaughan. He intended to find a weakness, a mistake, a skeleton in her closet, anything he could use to disqualify her, to paint her as incompetent or corrupt. He wanted to prove to Alistair Finch that he had backed the wrong horse. He wanted to destroy the foundation of her new life. His researchers worked for weeks, but they came up empty. Ariela's life had been utterly scandal-free. Her work for Ethelred was by all accounts exemplary. The company's stock had risen steadily since her involvement. She was a ghost in terms of leverage. There's nothing, Jasper, his head of research reported, looking nervous. She has no debt, no shady dealings, no disgruntled former colleagues. Her record is pristine. It's almost unnatural. The pristine nature of her past only fueled Jasper's paranoia. No one was that clean. He became obsessed, spending late nights personally sifting through documents, old emails, anything that might provide a clue. His work at Nexus began to suffer. He was distracted, volatile, his judgment clouded by his personal vendetta. The proxy battle for Ethelred was becoming uglier and more expensive by the day. Jasper's team released statements questioning Ethelred's leadership and financial stability. But Ethelred, guided by Ariela's strategy and backed by Finch's immense capital, countered every move with calm factual rebuttals. They portrayed Nexus Dynamics as a corporate raider trying to crush a smaller, innovative European competitor. The European press, and even some American financial journalists, began to side with Ethelred. Jasper was losing, and as he lost, he grew more desperate. In Berlin, Ariela watched Jasper's machinations with a sense of grim predictability. She and Alistair had anticipated this. "He's playing his old game," she told Alistair during one of their daily video conferences. She was in Ethelred's sleek, minimalist boardroom, while he was in his study, half a world away. When he can't win on merit, he tries to destroy his opponent's character. And in doing so, he is revealing his own. Alistair replied, his voice calm. He is over-leveraging Nexus. His board must be getting nervous. His obsession is making him reckless. Let him continue. But Ariela knew there was another angle Jasper would eventually try, a more personal one. The call came one afternoon. It was from her younger sister Chloe, a gentle soul who worked as an elementary school teacher in Ohio. Chloe was crying. "Ellie, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't know what to do." "Chloe, slow down. What is it? What happened?" Ariela asked, her blood turning to ice. "A man came to see me," Chloe explained between sobs. "A lawyer, I think. He said he represented Jasper. He started asking questions about Mum and Dad's inheritance. The money you used to, you know." Ariela felt the air leave her lungs. The seed money, the small inheritance from her parents that she had given Jasper to start his company all those years ago. It had been a gift given out of love and belief. There was no paperwork, no loan agreement, just a wife's faith in her husband. "He was asking if there were any documents," Chloe continued, "if you ever called it a loan. He said if you were trying to claim any stake in Nexus based on that money, Jasper would sue you for fraud. He said he would sue me for conspiring with you. He mentioned my teaching license, Ellie. He threatened my job." The sheer, unadulterated cruelty of it took Ariela's breath away. He wasn't just coming after her. He was threatening her family. He was trying to poison the purest, most selfless act of her life and turn it into a weapon against her. "Listen to me, Chloe," Ariela said, her voice shaking but firm. "You have done nothing wrong. This is a scare tactic. He is a bully and a coward. Do not speak to this man again. If he contacts you, you hang up. Understand?" After calming her sister down, Ariela hung up the phone, and for the first time since the ordeal began, she felt a wave of true, white-hot fury. This crossed a line. This was no longer business. This was personal. She immediately called Alistair. She recounted the conversation, her voice tight with rage. For a long moment there was silence on the other end of the line. When Alistair finally spoke, his voice had lost its customary calm. It was replaced by something cold and hard as steel. "He has made a grave error, Ariela," he said slowly. "He has mistaken our restraint for weakness. He believes this is a game of corporate chess. He has forgotten that in real life, when you threaten a person's family, the rules change." "What do we do?" Ariela asked, her mind racing. "For years, you have honored an agreement that has silenced you and erased your history," Alistair said. "That NDA was designed to protect his reputation and his assets, but he has now threatened your family in an attempt to further leverage a company you helped build. In my opinion, that constitutes a material breach of good faith. The agreement was predicated on a quiet separation. This is an act of aggression." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "He's been digging into your past for a weakness. I think it's time we took a closer look at his. Not his personal life, his professional one. Specifically, the origins of Nexus Dynamics. You said the original code was a joint effort, that the business plan was conceived together." "Yes," Ariela said quietly. "But I have no proof. It was all on old laptops on napkins. It's gone." "Is it?" Alistair asked, a new dangerous edge to his voice. "Jasper is arrogant, but he's also a digital pack rat. He never deletes anything. He sees it all as part of his legend. The original servers, the first lines of code, they're his origin story. He'll have them backed up somewhere in a digital archive he thinks no one can touch. Bullies always keep trophies of their conquests." Alistair continued, "I am going to authorize a full-scale digital forensic investigation. We're not hacking him. We are going to legally subpoena the digital archives of Nexus Dynamics as part of the discovery process for the proxy battle. He's accusing Ethelred's consultant you of being unqualified. We will counter that your qualifications are so profound that you were in fact the uncredited co-founder of his own company. We will force him to open his books, his files, his entire digital history. Let's see how the myth of the lone genius holds up under a federal subpoena." Ariela felt a jolt, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This was it, the point of no return. "He will fight it," she said. "And he will lose," Alistair countered, "because he has something to hide, and we, my dear Ariela, are about to bring it into the light. He wanted to dig into your past, fine. Let's show him what a real archaeological excavation looks like." So, the battle for Ethelred was about to become secondary. The real war, the war for the truth of Nexus Dynamics, was about to begin. And somewhere in a climate-controlled high-security server farm, the ghost on the napkin was waiting to be resurrected. The legal battle over the Ethelred proxy fight transformed into a direct assault on Jasper's history. Alistair's legal team from Quinn Emanuel filed a subpoena demanding access to Nexus Dynamics' earliest digital archives, arguing that Ariela's qualifications, and thus her competence as a consultant for Ethelred, were rooted in her uncredited role as a co-founder. Jasper's lawyers fought back with frantic energy, decrying the move as an invasive fishing expedition designed to steal trade secrets. They filed motion after motion, but their desperation was transparent. "He's stalling," Ariela observed to Alistair from their London war room. "The more he fights this, the more certain I am that the proof is in there." "His resistance is the tell," Alistair agreed. "He's bluffing with a bad hand. It's time to call." Alistair's lawyers were relentless, and the judge, a sharp woman named Atherton, saw through the smokescreen. She granted a court-supervised forensic analysis of Nexus's archives, limited to the company's first 2 years. The news sent Jasper into a spiral of fury and paranoia. His carefully constructed past was about to be excavated. He became a ghost haunting his own company, his legendary focus shattered by the dread of what the forensic team might find in the digital tomb of his old hard drives. Weeks of tense silence followed as the experts sifted through terabytes of old data. For Ariela, The waiting was agonizing, but also clarifying. She poured her energy into her work, with Ethelred building her future, while the truth of her past was being unearthed. The breakthrough came on a grey Tuesday afternoon. An urgent call from Alistair's lead lawyer pulled her from a meeting. "We found it." The lawyer's voice was electric. "It's better than we could have possibly hoped." Ariela sank into a chair, her heart hammering against her ribs. "He's an obsessive archivist of his own genius," the lawyer explained, a note of incredulous laughter in his voice. "Buried in a backup from a 2010 home PC, we found a scanned file. Jasper was so narcissistic that he actually scanned the napkin." The napkin, from their old kitchen table. Ariela felt the air leave her lungs. On that flimsy piece of paper, in her own distinctive handwriting, was the flowchart for the app's core interface, and circled at the top, the name she had invented, Nexus. "But that's not the knockout punch," the lawyer continued, his voice dropping for dramatic effect. "In the same folder, there's a draft of the email he wrote to his first investor. He never sent this version. In it he states, and I am quoting directly, 'My partner and I have developed a revolutionary new platform. She is the architectural visionary behind the concept, while I am handling the business development and coding execution.'" He had written it himself. The unvarnished truth, saved in a moment of candor before his ego rewrote history. He had documented his own lie. "He erased you, Ariela," the lawyer said softly, "and now the evidence of that erasure will be his undoing." The documents were filed under seal, and the effect was seismic. When Jasper's lawyers informed him of the discovery, his world imploded. His legal case was not just compromised, it was annihilated. He was facing perjury charges and a lawsuit from Ariela that the now fraudulent NDA could no longer protect him from. The consequences were immediate. The proxy battle for Ethelred was over. He withdrew the bid in a humiliating public defeat, sending Nexus stock into a freefall. The board, furious at his reckless and costly vendetta, called an emergency meeting. That evening, while Jasper was locked in his office trying to stop the hemorrhaging, Sienna saw the truth. She was tied to a sinking ship, not a king. She quietly packed her jewelry and designer clothes and slipped out of the penthouse, disappearing from his life as silently as she had entered it. When Jasper finally emerged, defeated and broken, the cavernous apartment was silent. He was utterly alone. Across the Atlantic, Ariela stood on a balcony overlooking the London night. Alistair had flown in the moment he'd heard the news and now stood beside her. "It's over," she whispered, the words heavy with the weight of a long and painful journey. "No," Alistair corrected her, gently taking her hand. His presence was a warm, solid anchor in the swirl of events. "It's just beginning. You're free, Ariela. The gag is off. Your history is now yours to claim." She looked at him, her eyes shining in the city lights. The ghost on the napkin hadn't just exposed a lie, it had resurrected her truth. The war for her past was won. Now the campaign for her future could truly begin. The dam of Jasper's lies broke spectacularly. Once the court documents were unsealed, the story of the ghost on the napkin became a global sensation. The irrefutable proof of Ariela's foundational role, the scanned napkin, and the draft email admitting she was the architectural visionary, wasn't just a legal smoking gun. It was a devastating narrative. The reckoning for Jasper Vaughan was swift and total. The emergency board meeting was less a discussion than an execution. Faced with overwhelming evidence of fraud, a collapsed acquisition, and a stock price in freefall, they voted unanimously to oust him as CEO of the company he had stolen. His assets were frozen, shareholder lawsuits piled up, and the CCC launched a formal investigation. His professional world evaporated. His personal world followed suit. Sienna Monroe, seeing her patron's power vanish quietly, packed her designer bags and disappeared, leaving him utterly alone in the wreckage. Jasper became a pariah, a cautionary tale whispered in the boardrooms he once commanded. In stark contrast, Ariela's star ascended. She became a symbol of vindication. The media clamored for interviews, but she refused to engage in the salacious post-mortem of Jasper's career. She was not interested in revenge, only reclamation. She chose a single stage to tell her story, a keynote address at the Women in Tech Global Conference. In front of thousands, she spoke not of her personal pain, but of the creative passion that had once fueled Nexus. She framed her experience as one of many, a story of the countless women whose vital contributions have been systematically erased from the annals of innovation. Then, she delivered her masterstroke. She announced that her monumental settlement from Jasper, which gave her a significant minority stake in the company she co-founded, would be the seed capital for a new venture. For too long, history has been written by those who hold the pen, not those who had the idea. She declared, her voice resonating with quiet authority. That is why I'm announcing the formation of the Archimedes Foundation. Its mission is simple: to find, fund, and champion the unsung architects of our future. We will provide the capital and legal support to ensure their legacies are protected and their contributions are never again left as ghosts on a napkin. The ovation was immediate and overwhelming. In the front row, Alistair Finch watched not as a savior, but as a proud partner. He had provided the means for her to fight, but this victory, this transformation from victim to leader, was hers alone. Weeks later, after the final papers were signed, Ariela found herself walking near the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the site of her public re-emergence. The memory felt like a lifetime ago. Her phone rang with an unknown number. She answered. Ariela. The voice was a hoarse, broken version of Jasper's. I saw the news about the foundation. He paused, the silence heavy with all that was unsaid. It was always yours, wasn't it, the name? Nexus. It was the closest he could get to an admission, a final self-serving grasp for absolution. Ariela listened to the sounds of the city around her, a city that was no longer his, but a landscape of her own making. The anger and hurt were gone, replaced by a profound sense of peace. She had already moved on. Yes, it was, she said simply, her voice calm and final. Goodbye, Jasper. She ended the call before he could answer. She didn't need to hear another word. His chapter was finished. Slipping the phone into her pocket, Ariela Vaughan turned away from the museum and walked into the bright, clear afternoon, the sole architect of the brilliant future that lay ahead. And that's the incredible story of how a single moment on a red carpet can trigger an avalanche of truth and justice. It's a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about the spotlight you command, but the integrity you hold when no one is watching. Ariela Vaughan's journey wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming a history that was stolen from her and using her newfound power to build a better future for others. It shows us that, even when you're silenced, your truth has a way of coming to light. What do you think? Was Ariela's move at the Met Gala a brilliant act of empowerment or a cold, calculated strike? Who was the real villain in this story? Beyond just Jasper. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories of epic comebacks and justice served, drop a justice for Ariela in the comments section. And as always, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more true life dramas. Thanks for listening.